So, this is the final lecture in the series about the building of stuff and stuff used in building. This is Dura Europos. That's the Euphrates going by it. Dura Europos was a very important border city under the Romans up until 256 AD, when it was destroyed by the Sasanian Persians. And you can see it's like a lot of mud brick, very useful stuff, mud brick. And what happened prior to 256 is the Sasanian Persians were known for their ability to undermine walls. So what the Romans did was fill in behind the walls. So this is the wall here and the mural towers, the towers along the wall. And so they started filling up dirt behind the wall, in front of the wall. And this was intended to stop people being able to dig underneath the wall and collapse it. This led to quite a lot of the buildings being buried up to the roof, or almost up to the roof. Like this one. This has led to Dura Europos being referred to often as the Pompeii of the East. It's not entirely fair because Pompeii was like buried everywhere up to here, not just like over here, but it preserves some interesting things. This is a building next to the walls that was mostly covered with dirt, and so it was quite well preserved. After the previous lectures, you'll recognize this as being standard Middle Eastern mud brick architecture with open areas surrounded by rooms. This bit here is a significant part of this building. It's quite a larger building with a larger area here open to the sky. In an earlier phase of this building, you can see this looks like any other Middle Eastern building going back to the times of Ur, in which you have this open area in the middle, a courtyard, surrounded by buildings. But this building here, in the last phase, see here you can see they've got a big court outside this large building, and it's been modified. This is actually a very significant building. And what is particularly significant is this very nice niche. And this is on the west side of the building. This is a view of the interior. And here you can see the niche. And here you can also see all around the base of the walls are these benches. Now this is clearly a synagogue. This is a synagogue. The very well known nowadays, of course, as a place of worship for the Jewish faith, but really only started getting into the full swing of things after the destruction of the Second Temple. And so it's pretty clear this is a synagogue just by the benches for people to sit on and the niche where the Torah was kept. But on the walls, for instance, at this spot, were frescoes, were wall paintings of scenes from the Old Testament or Torah. This is actually Moses opening the Red Sea. So this, as I said, there are other buildings which are said to be synagogues, going back a couple more hundred years or so. But this is possibly the most reliably identified early synagogue. As I say, synagogues really got going after the Second Temple in Jerusalem was destroyed by the Romans in 70 AD. Here is another building at Dura Europos. Again, courtyard entrance, surrounded by buildings, rooms, very typical. However, this was quite unusual in a number of features, one of which was in this quite small room off on one side, which had a bath in it and had frescoes from the life of Jesus and also the death of Jesus. This is the tomb, and here is Mary Magdalene coming to see Jesus, who's not there, of course. And so this is actually a baptistry. This is a baptistry, and so you can see, mud brick covered with a lot of lime plaster and painted, and making a baptistry, a very important part of the Christian faith, particularly the early Christian faith. So here, another drawing of this building. You can see not only is the baptistry, this large building, this large room is also quite interesting. It has this plinth here, which has 4 marks on it showing it had a table on it. And this is actually to the east in this case. The east is the direction that early Christians, and in fact all Eastern Christians to this day, pray. Churches are always oriented towards the east in the traditions of other pre-existing faiths of Western Asia, where it's pointing towards the rising sun. So that clearly makes this a church. It's a building turned into a church, and so in some ways it's quite reminiscent of some of those Çatalhöyük houses where you just get a bit carried away with a bit of plaster and a few bull's horns, and you've made a spiritual center. You've made a shrine, which probably became a center of worship for the region. And so this, just a simple house, has become possibly the world's earliest found church. And again, there are other buildings where you say, oh no, this is the earliest one. This is probably the most reliably identified. Talking of churches, there is, of course, the church at the monastery of Deir Marmuza in Syria, near Damascus. And that's it up on the hill, and that's it from another hill. And this is a plan. And the plan includes this, which is the chapel or church of the monastery, a number of phases which you can identify by looking at the stuff it's made of. This inner core here is probably the earliest part of the church, which was made of large cobbles, probably built by monks, whereas these later phases were made of well-dressed stone, which were probably made later by the Byzantine authorities. This style of church has an apse here, so this is the altar here, and an aisle each side of a nave, as they're called. And this is what is known as a basilica. This goes back to pre-Christian times, but the Christians took it up in a big way, and many churches around the world to this day have the basilical form. Of course, in this case, it's pointing east, although some modern churches point in any old direction. Here's another interesting building. This is the Temple of Bel at Tadmor or Palmyra, which was, of course, destroyed by ISIS. So this was originally built to worship the local deity of Bel, related to Baal, of course. So here, this is the north this way and south, east, and west. It's practically perfectly aligned on the cardinal directions. After a while, of course, they stopped worshipping Bel here. This is somewhere where there'd be a mobile shrine, it is thought. At the other end would be the main statue of Bel. Now here, on the eastern wall, is an interesting feature. And you can see that originally this was covered with probably fine marble or something like that. That's what these little niches in here are for, to fix the finer stone. And so it's after that time that this niche was put here with this covering. And this is the eastern wall. And so this is almost certainly the site of a Christian altar underneath here. So it would be a canopy over the altar. Supporting that identification are the frescoes all over the walls. So this is the walls after they've been cleared off of the marble or other fine stone. So it's just the bare ashlar stone construction covered with painting. So here is a head. See the head, the eyes and hair, and these are wings of an angel. Here's another head with angel's wings. So at that time, when this was a church, all of the walls were actually covered with paintings. This is another later modification of the Temple of Bel. You can see someone's carved a niche here, and this is on the south side of the building. And so we know if it was a niche on the west side of the building, it might have been a synagogue. If it was a niche on the east side of the building, it might have been a church for a church. But a niche on the south side of the building, in this case, is because it's a mihrab, which points towards the Qibla, the direction of Mecca. And so, since it's a modified building, it might not be perfect, but in this case, it actually is pretty close. Here is Tadmor Palmyra, and here's Mecca. And so a building that's pointing to the south is like it was made to be turned into a synagogue, which of course makes it particularly unfortunate that a group of Muslim extremists blew it up, since the last time it was actually had a function, it was a mosque. So ISIS blew up a mosque. So the need to point towards Mecca creates all sorts of interesting effects. This is the Meydan Isha in Isfahan, a pre-existing open space, and you can see building mosques in the area have to completely go against the pre-existing street plan. So the earliest type of mosques is probably the hypostyle mosques filled with columns, but when the religion moved to more rainy areas of parts of the world, which you may not think of Syria as being rainy, but compared to the Arabian desert it is, they would have had to build larger buildings made of with roofs over. So here you can see the mihrab, and the Qibla is this direction, due south. And so here, part of the point of the way they pray is to have this breadth in the direction of prayer. And this is the outside. It's very nice. Another thing you might find at a mosque is a minaret. This is at Samarra. This will be made of fired brick. Otherwise it probably would have fallen down by now. So now we are actually on to castles, which I was sort of alluding to with the title. This is Qalat Saladin, the fortress of Saladin, which was originally a Byzantine fortress built in the 10th century, and then became a Crusader fortress, and then a Muslim fortress after being taken by Saladin. And it has all sorts of very interesting architectural points to show you how you built this sort of thing. So these green bits here are the Byzantine bits, and they have all, and it also goes down to here. So there's a wall here, there's a Byzantine wall here, and the outer wall here would have originally been Byzantine, and they probably built this massive ditch which cut this promontory off from the other hillside. And so they have all these walls with these towers in them. Mural towers, as they're called. So this is quite a nice one. So here's the main wall, and this is the tower, and you can see it's angled. So there's all sorts of towers you can have. You can have square towers and round towers, but what you tend to have at the top are crenellations. So crenellations are made of a merlon and an embrasure. So basically you stand behind the merlon. So to remember this, just imagine Merlin, say Merlin the wizard, is standing in front of you to stop people throwing things at you. So you're standing here behind the Merlin, or Merlon. Don't spell it wrong in the test, of course. And so each side of the merlons is the embrasure. So just imagine you have two merlins embracing you, and that's what's happening. You're just standing here, and there's two merlins, and they're both giving you a hug. So that's the embrasure. So the idea of this is you actually do not expose yourself. You stand behind the merlon and shoot your bow. See, this man's carrying a bow this way, and so you can stand behind it. Sometimes they'll have arrow slots in the merlon, so you can shoot down or that sort of thing. But basically, you need to stay behind it and shoot at people over here, and the people over here can't shoot you. So this works particularly well when you have towers. And what you want to be able to do is, if you have an archer here, they can fire along the wall. And so that means anybody standing up against the wall trying to knock it down gets shot by an archer. That's the plan. And so here you have a round tower, and you can see there's actually dead areas where it's possible to hide. There are even more dead areas around a square tower. But an angled tower, there is nowhere to hide. So in a way, this is probably the best form of tower, which you could see in that very early 9th, 10th century part of the architecture. This is a great variance to the fortifications at Helm's Deep, which were terrible. And whenever I watch this movie, I am deeply in pain by the wallhead defenses, as we call them in castle architecture, where you have these silly little embrasures, just arrow slots really, and these merlons which are too short and designed in fact to bounce any arrows off into your face. It's horrifying, and is basically designed to make anybody standing up here a sitting target. Nothing like the real thing. Anyway, I thought I'd share that with you. Back to Qalat Saladin, and here's the very large ditch, probably built by the Byzantines. This is the Crusader keep. So the Byzantines had like a lot of men, shall we say, and so they had a central keep and a number of walls you had to get through to get to the keep. Whereas the Crusaders had much fewer people to look after this place, and so they put their strongest fortification over the main entrance, which came across here. And here it is from this. Here's the Byzantine keep, the center of a series of concentric walls, and here is the Crusader keep, and this here was the main entrance across here. So they're sort of keeping an eye on that. So you might notice that this is actually the same level as this, of course, because it was originally just a ridge going out like that way. And so this is very vulnerable here. That's why there's a big ditch here. So this is fine in earlier times when it was built, but then you had these things called trebuchets, which were being developed during the medieval period. So by the time you get to Saladin in the late 13th century, they had developed into the full counterweight trebuchet. So here's the counterweight, and here is a piece of ammunition, say a big round rock, and so you shoot, and it goes off like that. And so because you have the ammunition, which is of a standard size, you have a weight which is predictable, this will always deliver a very large rock, and some of these rocks have been recorded to be as big as a small car, to exactly the right place. This is why in some of these castles in the Middle East you'll have these piles of stones which are for trebuchet. And this was my team in the 2006 season at Deir Marmuza, many of which are standing in the way, and I said, can you get out of the way so I can photograph the stones? But, you know, people. So Saladin set up his trebuchets here, and of course shot right across this quite narrow, although very deep, ditch, and totally destroyed the corner over here where the gate was. And so you can see these blue bits here, Islamic period 1. So this was the rebuilding afterwards. In fact, all of this area was destroyed pretty much down to the ground. And over here there's absolutely nothing left of it. And so this was all completely obliterated by these trebuchets just dropping rocks right on the walls here. And so there was nothing left here. All the Crusaders came up to this end to defend, have a last-ditch defense, and Saladin's forces actually snuck up around the back and took the castle. So, how to defend yourself against trebuchets you find at this castle, often known as Crac de Chevalier, known locally as Khalat al-Husn. And this is a very nice castle. Here on the north side, far away from the hill next to the castle, it's very old school. Upright walls, gate going in this way, very traditional. On the other side, they have what is called a glacis. And this is a defense against trebuchets. And so you can see this slope, basically if it gets hit by a rock, the wall will basically want to stay where it is. You see it covers all of this southern side facing the hill next to it. So there's a bit of a ditch here on the outside, but basically if you put up your trebuchets here, you can bombard this quite well. And so the glacis is designed to stop that. Now that didn't stop the Mamluk Sultan Baybars in 1271 from taking this castle, because he could still set up trebuchets here and bombard the outer walls, which would have been about here. And so that took the outside. It probably would have taken a long time to get this side, but one problem with this castle is they hadn't set up a way to put a nice big trebuchet to shoot back. So when this wall was reconstructed by Baybars, he put this big tower here, big square tower, where you could have a nice big trebuchet to shoot back at anybody shooting at you, and like a smaller one here. So that would make it more defensible from any attack from this side. But still, it's quite vulnerable. So the next, and shall we say final phase of this sort of thing, can be exampled at Aleppo Citadel. At Aleppo, this is the in northern Syria, there's a glacis all the way around. In earlier times there would have been walls, in the earlier Middle Ages, at the bottom of the glacis, at the same level as the surrounding area. And here you can see this is the base of a tower, and there are traces of walls around here. So there would have been walls here which would have been very vulnerable to trebuchets, and you'd be able to shoot over here and demolish them, and you'd be able to walk straight in. And so what they did was they demolished all those walls and built this glacis on the outside, which originally went all the way around the castle. And so the walls up here are way out of range of any trebuchet. You have to go really high to hit these walls. And so it's quite defensible. The only bit that comes forward, possibly within trebuchet range, is the gate. And so they had big towers. There's an earlier tower here and the later tower built on top of it. And from here you can shoot really big trebuchets back at anyone who sets up a trebuchet here to shoot at that. So that's how castles developed into what we often see now. And of course then sometime later someone invented gunpowder, which we shall discuss later on, which messed all that up again. So that's enough for buildings for now, and next time we'll be starting pottery. Wouldn't that be